Mike Florio, his book, Father of Mine, about the mob in 1973, available online wherever books are sold. He, of course, is the popular co-host of Pro Football Talk Live that precedes this program on Peacock, and he contributes to NBC's Football Night in America. Mike, good to have you back. What stands out? What was the one thing that stood out from the schedule release?
Well, we all wanted to see when, where, how often we would witness the Jets with Aaron Rodgers in standalone games. 6 in all, 4 more that start at 4:25 p.m. Eastern, which are big audience games. Those generate huge ratings on CBS or Fox. And when you look at their schedule, and Dan, this is something to keep in mind because everybody's going to expect the Jets to make it to the playoffs. There's a quirk in the schedule where you have a rotation every year. Every team from a given division plays all of the teams from one of the other divisions in the conference and all of the teams from one of the divisions in the other conference. And it just both rotate every year. And it fits together. And this year it has landed like the Wheel of Fortune on AFC West and NFC East. That's half your schedule against 2 of the better divisions in the NFL.
Yeah.
So when you start talking about wild card berths, and also you're cannibalizing 6 games of your own schedule against your division rivals. I'm not so sure more than one team is getting out of the AFC East this year with a playoff spot.
Whoa.
I don't know that one of those other teams is getting a wild card berth. And you look at the Jets, they got the Chiefs, the Eagles, and the Cowboys in the first 5 weeks. They got some tough games, and they may not make it to the playoffs.
But then you're saying the Dolphins may not make it to the playoffs.
And the Patriots.
Patriots not making the playoffs.
It may be one team and one team only. That's why week 1 for the Jets is so critical, Dan, because if they lose to the Bills at home and then they have to go play at Buffalo later, you get swept by the Bills. Good luck beating out the Bills for the division title if the Bills have swept you, beaten you twice, and hold the head-to-head tiebreaker. So that week 1 game is critical. Those early season games are huge for the Jets.
Do you think the Jets roster is ready for this? We know Rodgers can be, but the Jets roster, their coach, the coverage. Now you're not you're the Jets. Now you're the Jets. Expectation level is through the roof.
Well, and part of it is you embrace it because along the way you make a lot of money. You get a lot of attention. You get to bask in the spotlight, even if at the end of the day you're on the sideline watching the other teams play in the postseason. So there's different ways to define success from a business standpoint. Only one team wins the Super Bowl, but all the other teams have to make money. And the Jets have been irrelevant for so long. This is their moment, however it plays out. And I interviewed Joe Douglas, the GM of the Jets, yesterday, and I tried to figure out what's that line of demarcation between success and failure. What does it take for you to say, we did the right thing here? And it's going to be fascinating to see because they're never going to admit to us. They're never going to say, we really screwed that up. We never should have traded for Aaron Rodgers. But they're going to be relevant. They're going to be present. They're going to make money. But how good are they going to be? And you raise a great point. They got a lot of young players who are going to have to grow up quickly if they want to compete, especially if they start off 2-4 through their first 6 games, which isn't impossible.
I brought this up. I don't know if you had any further information on it, but when's the last time a team that didn't make the playoffs from the preceding year opened up in the first game of the season against the defending champs?
So yeah, that's a great question. It's a great question. And I didn't consider the Lions as a candidate for that opening game, in part because I wasn't sure the NFL would fully lean into this buzz that the Lions have developed. But when I saw that that's the first game, I thought, this is great. This is great. The Lions have not been relevant forever, not since Barry Sanders. You could argue maybe 2012, but that year they were terrible. Calvin Johnson set the all-time single-season receiving yardage record, and they had Matthew Stafford and they had Ndamukong Suh, but they weren't great. It's been a very long time, 31 years since they've won a playoff game, for crying out loud. But I think it's fascinating. But you're right. The Lions haven't proven anything. They've got a high bar.
But they're not must-see TV, Mike. I think they're a good team. When I say the Lions, you think of their head coach. That's what I found interesting. The Vikings aren't interesting. They might be a good coach or a good team, but this is the opening night. I just found that interesting that if you were going to have a game, do you need to have a game where we're tuning in for both of these teams?
As an NBC employee, allow me to make the case for watching the first game of the season. And, Dan, look at the captive audience games this year. I think the NFL decided not to drop great games into the spots where they know that we're going to watch anywhere. We're going to watch on Thanksgiving. Why are we going to burn Jets at Cowboys on Thanksgiving? I thought there was a chance that would be the Thanksgiving game. Why do it? Why bother?
Okay.
We're still going to tune in and watch Commanders Cowboys. What else are we going to do? It's Christmas games, Raiders Chiefs. Okay, fine. We're going to watch anyway. It's not one of the great games on the schedule, but drop it there. And I think that same mindset may have applied here. People are still going to tune in to watch Patrick Mahomes. He has transcended football. He is now a star. Met Gala, Kentucky Derby, everywhere you look, there's Patrick Mahomes. And the Lions do have that up-and-coming vibe. They've got an enigmatic and charming head coach who everybody wants to hear from. So they could have done a lot worse than the Lions. And I think it'll do a huge number. And they kept in the bag one of the great games, Eagles Chiefs, for example. One of the games we looked at and said, well, that's likely to be the week one opener. They hold it for later in the year.
Why are the Dolphins and Chiefs playing in Germany?
Dan, we got a lot of people that watch our show on Sky Sports Action. That's what they call it in the offseason. It's Sky Sports NFL in the regular season. There are a ton of passionate UK NFL fans. I don't think there are enough. I don't think it gets enough play in London. I think this game in Germany, Dolphins Chiefs, is an acknowledgement that the ceiling may be higher in Germany for the NFL
I agree.
than it is in England.
Yeah.
And if I'm a British fan of the NFL and we've been kissing frogs for 16 years with these crap games you've been sending over, they get Tom Brady their first year. They get Patrick Mahomes versus Tyreek Hill the second year. What are we? Well, the fervor, the excitement, Peter King says it was like attending a conference championship game, going to that game in Germany. And I think the NFL is understanding that and embracing it.
More worthy of primetime games, in your opinion, if I said the Chargers or Cincinnati? Chargers have 6, Bengals have 4.
Well, you know what? I'd say the Bengals are more worthy of that platform and that presence because Joe Burrow is just fun to watch. The team is great at this point. But with the Chargers, you can always count on them doing something to make a game interesting. The very dated reference that I make about the Chargers, they're my Rosanna Dana team. It's always something with the Chargers. So they're going to give you something. They're going to turn a bad game into a good game. They're going to turn a good game into a bad game. They're going to blow a 27-point lead. They keep it entertaining. So I kind of like having the chance to study the Chargers carefully.
The most interesting bad team is
probably the Rams because they are a bad team now. They can't call themselves a good team anymore. They are going to compete with the Cardinals for the basement of the NFC West, and they have a tough schedule right out of the gates. And I think it's going to be fascinating to see how this goes with Matthew Stafford, who's an old 35, Aaron Donald doing what he can to load it up for one more year with the Rams. And I think he'll be done with the Rams after this year. Sean McVay teetered enough about whether he was going to come back to make that an issue this year, even though he's trying not to make it one. And if the Chargers continue to get better, it makes it even more glaring if the Rams struggle.
Mike Florio, Pro Football Talk Live co-host, and his new book, Father of Mine. It's about the mob in the early 70s, available online wherever books are sold. Tom Brady, I guess the report out of ESPN is he is going to be buying in as a partner of the Raiders. Your
Isn't
thoughts?
it funny how ESPN reports this very sensitive and developing information about Brady possibly buying part of the Raiders when they knew damn well he was possibly buying part of the Dolphins last year and they never said a word about it? I just love to know how they pick and choose which sensitive topics they're going to go with.
Why wouldn't they report on the Dolphins?
I don't know, but plenty of people knew about the Dolphins last year and they kept their mouths shut. And I'd love to know why people kept their mouths shut when they knew damn well.
Why do you think?
Because Tom Brady wasn't okay with it getting out. And he's okay with this getting out. And he wasn't okay with it getting out a year ago. That's my only explanation. So that's why I thought it was just funny to see it couched as sensitive and developing. If it was sensitive, it was truly sensitive, they wouldn't be reporting on it because Tom Brady would have told Don Yee to tell Shefty to not report on it. It would have been that simple. I don't want to go that far behind the curtain. I don't want to go too far inside baseball, but that was just, as somebody who covers this every day and is always plugged into the matrix, I thought it was funny that this gets reported when they knew damn well last year he was going to be part owner of the Dolphins and then play for the Dolphins. And it was, nobody said anything except us.
Help me understand the Jaguars situation with their stadium. Are they have to renovate and then they have to move someplace for their home games? And are they going to go to Orlando? Where do the Jags go? What is it, a 2-year period we're talking about coming up?
This first popped up on Wednesday. The outgoing mayor of Jacksonville said if they're going to renovate this stadium the way they want to, it's going to be best case scenario, Dan, 2 years where the Jaguars can't play in that stadium. I don't know where you find another NFL-ready stadium in town. You're going to have to go somewhere. And their lease runs through 2029. So you're displaced for 2 years. And if you're going to do this renovation, I'm assuming you're going to extend the lease and you're going to be tied to Jacksonville indefinitely. I just feel like this is the point where it's going to go one way or the other. There's either going to be a renewal of the vows with Jacksonville, which still will result in 2 years of playing somewhere else, maybe London, or the clock ticks toward 2029 and outgo the Jaguars to London. And I know folks in Jacksonville don't want to hear it, but I remember vividly folks in St. Louis didn't want to hear it when the handwriting was on the wall that the Rams were going to LA. And everybody knew it except the folks in St. Louis because the NFL was lying to them and the Rams were lying to them about their intentions. In this case, you know, the commissioner talking about a 4-team division eventually in Europe. Well, unless it's going to be 4 expansion teams, a number one choice is the Jaguars. So I just feel like this whole process is so weird that the end result is either going to be Jaguars forever in Jacksonville or Jaguars on a steamship to London.
Are we more likely to have a Super Bowl? What happens first? Super Bowl outside the United States or a team outside the United States?
Team. I think Super Bowl is something that gets kind of thrown around just for craps and giggles, but it's never going to happen. They're going to start a Super Bowl at 1 a.m. British time to suit our TV pattern. So I think it's going to be a team. Once the commissioner talked about 4 teams, that tells me that this talk of one team that's been around for over a decade isn't just dangling a carrot to get people in Europe interested. At some point, they're going to have to put teams there, starting with 2 in London and then maybe 2 in Germany.
Is there an expansion city in the United States?
I think there would be potential expansion cities. St. Louis would be perfect if the NFL could ever get over the fact that they had to pay St. Louis nearly $800 million for lying their asses off to the people in St. Louis about not moving the Rams to LA. And they did. They lied, and that's why they paid nearly $800 million to St. Louis when it was all said and done. St. Louis would be perfect. And one thing, I talked to somebody about this within the past year or two. You could justify smaller markets, just build a smaller stadium, because it's now all about TV revenue. For that upper deck on a stadium, you know, I've talked to owners about this. The money that they make and the costs that they incur to fill out an upper deck of an NFL stadium, it's really not worth it. And I think there are some groups now that would say, if we were doing it all over again, we just would get rid of the upper deck, that it's not entailing the profit margin that it justifies. So, you know, you put in Oklahoma City, you put in Columbus, Ohio, you put, you know, there's different cities that aren't major, massive 80,000 seat stadiums that you know are going to be filled up every week. You could put a 40,000 seat stadium there, fill it every week. And as long as those games are on TV, it's a win for the NFL.
Have a great weekend, Mike. Good luck with the book. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks, Dan. Good talking to you, pal.
That's Mike Florio, Pro Football Talk Live co-host. We'll take a break.